Hello and welcome. In this video, we'll explore a shift into a higher perspective that, if truly understood, can transform how you interact with others and navigate life situations. This perspective fosters greater awareness, supporting your growth, maturity, and alignment with the natural flow of life. It begins internally with the attitude you bring to interactions and the level of consciousness you apply to them. At its core, it centers on two distinct ways of engaging with oneself and the world: internal considering and external considering. Internal considering involves reacting to situations with a focus on personal impact and interpreting events through the lens of one's own ego-driven needs, insecurities, or desires. This inward focus often results in self-centered responses where the main concern is how others view, validate, or affect one's sense of self. In contrast, external considering shifts attention away from oneself toward the needs, perspectives, and experiences of others, fostering responses that are more compassionate and aligned with a broader understanding of each situation. This outward orientation aligns with a deeper sense of purpose, supporting actions that prioritize connection, harmony, and genuine awareness over personal gratification. These teachings were developed by philosopher and spiritual teacher Gurdjieff as part of the Fourth Way tradition, a path of self-development that integrates physical, emotional, and intellectual growth. However, similar principles can be found in older traditions, such as Taoism. Taoist teachings emphasize living in harmony with the Tao, or natural way, by adopting a balanced, less self-centered outlook. Taoism encourages responding to the world with humility and a mindful awareness of others, rather than focusing solely on personal desires or ego. In this context, it can be helpful with a small reminder not to get caught up in language and labels, but to focus on the reality that the language points to, with the realization that language will never fully capture this reality. Thus, internal and external considering should be used as useful labels that help understand one's inner life, but they point to a host of personal experiences, and how they manifest is unique to every individual. We are now going to look closer at the distinction between inner and outer considering, so that you get a firm grip of what we're talking about. Internal considering refers to how one processes experiences with an excessive focus on oneself, often driven by ego-centered reactions and personal judgments. It's a stance that, first and foremost, asks, how does this affect me personally, even if we usually don't spell things out for ourselves so bluntly? This mode involves an inward focus that emphasizes personal thoughts, emotions, and self-referential interpretations. When one encounters a situation, an automatic reaction may emerge, centered on how it affects one's self-image, comfort, or importance. This creates reactions that often distort the actual experience, leading to discomfort or defensiveness. Internal considering can cause a person to feel slighted easily, dwell on imagined offenses, or inflate their sense of self. It is seen as a root cause of personal suffering, as it traps one in cycles of self-centered thought and emotion, isolating one from others and causing unnecessary inner conflict. For example, after giving a presentation, a colleague offers constructive feedback. From internal considering, you might focus on how this affects your self-image, feeling personally criticized instead of seeing it as helpful. This reaction can lead to embarrassment or defensiveness, as you interpret the feedback as an attack on your competence. Internal considering, then, magnifies the perceived impact on your self-worth, causing unnecessary stress, and you might respond to the feedback in a negative manner, causing conflict between you and the colleague and disharmony in the workplace. Can you see the ego at play here? There is no benefit in this response to anyone, and it's just about the ego's need to protect its self-image, which is ultimately nothing more than an illusory construct of the mind. Can you also see that this is usually just an automatic reaction? Your colleague offers feedback, which is a neutral situation, and the ego interprets it in a certain way, based on the inner place from which you receive the feedback, which in turn sets a host of automatic thoughts in motion and may also cause you to, either subtly or overtly, respond to your colleague in a negative way. External considering, on the other hand, encourages a focus on understanding others and the external world rather than oneself. This approach prompts one to respond to situations from a broader, more objective standpoint. Instead of reacting primarily from a personal perspective, external considering encourages sensitivity to others' needs, perspectives, and realities. It urges one to move beyond personal reactions and respond thoughtfully. This shift allows for constructive responses rather than emotionally charged reactions, helping foster harmony and connection rather than alienation. Here, your main concern is not just understanding, but also the understanding of what impact your words and behavior have on your surroundings. Approaching the same feedback in the example from before from external considering, you would focus on understanding the colleague's perspective rather than on your self-image. You'd listen openly, aiming to see the feedback as helpful rather than as a personal critique, assuming that others usually want to help you rather than harm you if they haven't clearly shown you otherwise. Recognizing that the colleague's intention is likely to support your improvement, you'd feel less defensive and more receptive. External considering allows you to respond constructively, appreciating the feedback for what it is, valuable input for growth. This approach fosters a sense of cooperation and learning, helping you maintain a positive perspective and stay connected to the purpose of the interaction rather than to personal pride. Now, can you see that this is about making a choice on the inside? And can you furthermore see that what we are talking about here is not giving up something valuable to you in an act of self-sacrifice? It's rather about choosing a response that is less tainted by the ego and instead geared towards the greater good for everyone. If you want to train yourself in this mindset, a good way to do it is to study different types of conscious communication, where you learn how the choice of words affects those you speak to and how to seek agreement and cooperation, rather than division, animosity, and battle between conflicting wills. Gurdjieff proposed that internal considering is deeply rooted in traits like narcissistic self-love, pride, and vanity, qualities that drive a need for validation and affirmation from outside sources. This tendency can trap a person in cycles of self-referential thinking, where every interaction is subconsciously assessed in terms of personal impact. For example, rather than celebrating a colleague's success, a person focused on internal considering might feel envy or resentment, interpreting the success as a threat to their own position. Such reactions illustrate how internal considering can distort experiences, making it challenging to engage with others openly and authentically. A side note about self-love is here called for. In the fourth way tradition, self-love is generally looked upon as something negative, and this is probably due to a confusion of terms, hence the need to add narcissistic to it. Real self-love, stemming from a place of true confidence and humility, is not self-centered, but instead a sign of healthy self-worth. Narcissism, on the other hand, distorts self-love into an excessive focus on self-image, where one's sense of worth depends heavily on external validation and admiration. It creates a fragile ego that demands constant affirmation, leading to shallow relationships and a limited capacity for genuine empathy. Through self-observation, a person can begin to notice when internal considering arises. As was stated in the beginning, this is about an inner disposition, which means that this shift begins by turning the focus towards one's internal state. In the fourth way, self-observation is the first essential step to recognize one's automatic patterns and reactions. This practice enables one to see when thoughts, emotions, and behaviors are purely mechanical, meaning they occur without conscious awareness or intention. Applying self-observation to internal and external considering reveals how often responses are driven by self-centered motives. Through observation, one can identify these inward-focused reactions, such as defensiveness or resentment, and realize they arise automatically as part of habitual ego-driven patterns. Observing oneself in moments of social or interpersonal interaction allows one to catch moments of internal considering before they solidify into reactive responses, offering the chance to consciously redirect attention outward. This process slowly enables a transition from reactive, self-focused behavior to more intentional, compassionate engagement, fostering self-awareness and deliberate choice over mechanical behavior. It's important to realize that we are not as aware of either our behavior, what we say, what we think, or our true motivations. Therefore, the mere act of becoming aware of what is going on the inside will begin to shift your focus and your responses. The goal here is not to suppress these reactions, but to observe them without fully identifying with them. The way this works is that self-observation creates space between automatic responses and conscious awareness, which gradually weakens the habitual pull of internal considering. Gurdjieff explained this distinction in terms of psychological freedom. Internal considering keeps one tied to reactive patterns and impulses, often driven by pride or fear of vulnerability. External considering, however, is tied to a greater sense of freedom, allowing one to respond consciously rather than react automatically. By focusing on others' well-being and perspectives, external considering dissolves the rigid boundaries of ego that limit perception and understanding. This openness allows for genuine communication and compassionate action, leading to relationships built on mutual respect rather than competition or self-assertion. Interestingly enough, internal consideration often gives off the illusion of autonomy, as we place our focus on ourselves, and therefore it may seem like we prioritize our own well-being. But as was just demonstrated, this is not the case. Instead, we become slaves under our lower nature with its lower impulses and general reactivity. In this context, it's worth emphasizing that this is not about living a life of self-sacrifice, where we always place other people's needs above our own. That there is a conflict between our own true interests and the true interests of others is an illusion created by the ego. What we truly want is always aligned with the greater good, and where there is a conflict, you can be certain that someone's ego is involved. Thus, external considering is not about becoming anyone's doormat. On the contrary, external considering may often mean having to say no in uncomfortable situations, with the risk of it leading to anger and hurt feelings if one truly believes it is for the highest good. Always aiming to please others is actually a form of internal considering, as one is protecting oneself from the negative feelings associated with saying no, or craving the validation and feeling of being valuable that comes from pleasing others. This is of course often a balancing act, and it requires self-observation to discover the true motivations behind one's actions. What is important to remember is that this is something that benefits you as well. Prioritizing others' needs and realities doesn't just foster goodwill and understanding, countering the isolating effects of internal considering. It also brings more awareness into your life and helps you mature and have more meaningful relationships. This active engagement with the world is seen not as passive self-sacrifice, but as a deliberate practice, reflecting an inner alignment with principles of truth, sincerity, authenticity, and compassion. In summary, internal and external considering represent two contrasting ways of engaging with oneself and others. Internal considering emphasizes self-centered reactions, often leading to unnecessary suffering, while external considering encourages empathy, conscious action, and freedom from ego-driven impulses. By observing and gradually transforming internal considering into external considering, individuals can break free from reactive patterns and contribute positively to those around them. This shift is central to the fourth way's vision of conscious development, guiding one toward a balanced life of inner freedom and outer responsibility. And this is what it is about, inner freedom, specifically the freedom to choose your responses. You are reminded that it's about a choice on the inside. Even if it might not look like this right now, we are moving towards times of more harmony and cooperation, not less. And a big part of this is our recognition that we first and foremost have responsibility for how we treat our dealings with the external reality in our inner space. Realizing that we have a choice in how we respond rather than simply reacting out of habit helps us see that, though internal considering may appear to protect or strive for something valuable, it ultimately serves only the ego. Upon closer inspection, we find that defending the ego offers no real benefit to anyone. This shift will be uncomfortable in the beginning, and we will unconsciously slip back into old habits all the time. We have been programmed to think that we need certain things, that other people need to give us certain things, and that it's important that they see and treat us in certain ways. We will need to observe ourselves quite a lot to see all the ways we go against the intention of acting from this higher perspective. And we need to do it from a place of compassion towards ourselves. It's not easy to change ingrained patterns of responding to the circumstances we find ourselves in. It's fraught with lots of discomfort in the beginning, and just having made the conscious decision to do it is a huge step. Ultimately, when we realize that making an effort to foster harmonious relationships with others, and learning how to do that, rather than making an effort to make others give us what we think we want, is actually what will benefit everyone the most, a whole new world opens up to us, and we start to flow with the current of life instead of going against it. You've now reached the end of the video. Remember to like and subscribe. Thank you for your time.